All right. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever. Good day to all of you there. Good morning, wherever you are. I really care a lot about you. I really do care a lot. And I care what happens to you, and I want to talk to you in truth and love. The other day, a woman from Australia came out to my car, and she was... Just think about that right there. The way they say car, that's the way they say it in Boston too. Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. Good as gold. Same route. Boston, Australia. Anyway, this lady was from Australia. She said, I really like that bumper sticker, that sign on your car. And so I thought she was maybe from South Africa. So I spoke a little bit of Afrikaans to her, and she said she didn't understand. So I tried to guess. The accent, the dialect, and sometimes you get it wrong. And so she said, "No, I'm not from South Africa." She enunciated it like that. But probably the two dialects that are closest, South Africa and Australia. Australia's a little bit more out there, a little more cowboy, a little more fun and friendly. South Africa, Hakkamene Hennis, Goeiemorgen, tot ziens, venster. This has a Dutch influence. I wasn't knocking it or anything. I wasn't saying there was anything wrong with it. That's just the way it happened, you know. We had a good talk. My daughter had spent time in Switzerland, actually. Not a very long time, rather brief. But anyway, this is the Jeremiah Gunn Show. This Jeremiah Gunn Show, we only talk about things that are serious. You know, I never really got into fiction. I never got into fiction. You know, my oldest brother wrote a couple of fiction books, and man, I just never have. I've only been interested in nonfiction, and people find that kind of weird. But I'm not trying to escape reality. I'm trying to do what the soldiers in Afghanistan did. And they came up with a motto called "Embrace the Suck." I was just texting a friend of mine whose mom is going through Alzheimer's very badly. And I just try to encourage him with that little rule for living: embrace the suck. Imagine how horrible it was to be a soldier in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, the environment is like hell. And then to top it off, just a little cherry on top is people are trying to kill you, blow you up, shoot you, ambush you because you're trying to help your fellow man, their fellow man. So anyway, I don't want to be doom and gloom, a doom scroller, but you have to. The secret to joy is a little formula that goes Jesus, others, you. And you put it in that right priority. It's like a train. You don't put it in the wrong priority. Even though locomotives can run backwards, you can't get the caboose in front and all that. It just doesn't work. The coal car, you got to have order. So put your emphasis on your creator. And all the 12-step programs tell you that. They can't go and say what his name is, but they wouldn't have the results they have without that. But anyway, you got to get it in the right order. So in order to have joy, you have to give of yourself and just try to help other people. That's all we're trying to do. There's people that rob your joy. They're called psychic vampires. And you'll always hear me say that they're the same old, same old. They come from the father of all lies, communists. And why do you say Democrats all the time? Because Democrats don't care if you're a progressive, if you're a communist, if you're a Marxist. Big tent. Come on in. Come on in. We'll take you if it means power. We'll take it. We don't have any shame. We don't have any morals. We don't have any standards. Islamist, Sharia law, it doesn't matter. You're all under our big D. Big D. So we're going to talk about it a little bit here. But this is Jeremiah Gunn Show. This is CSN, the Common Sense Network, part of the ISI broadcasting system. I'm your war correspondent, broadcasting behind enemy lines. This is not a joke. This is not a drill. This is not meant to be something alarmist or, the guy in Congress, he pulled the fire alarm to break up because things were going too good for the enemy, he felt. Students will do that. They'll call in a bomb threat or they'll pull the fire alarm. But, when somebody does, even though Aesop told us way back in, ancient Greece, told us about the boy who cried wolf, but sometimes when somebody sounds the alarm, it's good, isn't it? Isn't it? You don't want to yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire. But if there is a fire, you're kind of doing somebody a favor. So this is the Jeremiah Gunn Show. I'm your answer man, Professor No, K-N-O-W. I want to devote today to be kind of free form and answer questions. I've gotten comments and questions coming in, and I want to answer them. And so just as a little preface, I want to talk about, as we talk about getting joy in the right order, you come last. You don't come first, you won't have joy. J-O-Y. Jesus, or justice, if you prefer to be secular, others, and you. And just in that same way, you have to get God, country, and family in the right order. If your family is against your country, if your state is against your country, and they're against your God, it doesn't matter if they're a pastor, priest, rabbi, woman wannabe pastor, rabbi, etc. It doesn't matter. It matters what side they're on. And so you might have to choose against your family in order to save your country. For God's sake. It has to be God, country, and family. So if your family is against your country and is against God, Jesus said, you're going to have to make a choice. He said, I didn't come to bring peace. Yeah, but they call him the Prince of Peace. It's, the New Testament is the most amazing thing. Christianity is the most amazing religion. We'll talk about that on another show, but it's a perfect balance. And the haters will say, well, that just shows that they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, and it's a riddle that you can't figure out of it. Jesus said it was a riddle, but anybody could figure it out. He came for fishermen and carpenters, farmers, He didn't create something that has to be esoteric and you got to go to some other authority to get it figured out. Nope. He said you need that no man teach you. You're capable of figuring this out. But he said, I came to bring peace, to divide mother against daughter and father against daughter and son against father and brother against brother. Where'd we hear that before? Civil War. You don't think that somebody said, well, I'd love to sign up to save the black people from the Democrat Party's slavery, but my brother's fighting for their side. I can't shoot at my own brother. I'm going to have to let the country go down. If that's what happens, I'm going to have to, I know that God doesn't have a stake in this. What? Both sides thought they were fighting for God. So, you got to get that in the right order. God, country, family. You can't get it out of order. It won't work. If you put the family first, you're going to F the country and you're going to F God. That's what these states are doing right now. The blue, no matter who, Democrat states. They're continuing the Civil War. They're saying, wait, we don't have to. I just watched a debate the other day, California candidates, and that's what we're going to talk about here. But anyway, God, country, family. There's this great movie called Chariots of Fire. Came out, won Academy Awards. I thought it was just a beautiful, wonderful film. I read the story of the runner who the story was based upon. He became a missionary, went to China, and died over there in a Japanese concentration camp. But it was a great story. Anyway, it came out. I was just new in my career, and we were talking about it at work during lunch, and this one woman says, I thought it was really boring. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's all you have to say. God forbid you be bored or learn anything or care about anybody. I just thought that movie was boring. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, have fun. Eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow we perish. As that day edges closer and closer where we perish. It's another thing we're going to talk about today. Anyway, so this movie, Chariots of Fire, he would not, this runner, would not compete. Charles Liddell, some people say Little, I think it's Liddell. Liddell. I don't know if his first name was Charles. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he would not run in a qualifying heat in the Paris Olympics of 1924 that just had their centennial, the most recent one. Anyway, he would not compete because it was on the Sabbath. That's what he believed. And so what did he? So there's this incredible scene where I think the king is sitting there with the prime minister, his right hand man, his chancellor or whatever, and another guy and this athlete, Liddell, who won't run because it's the Sabbath. You know who else did that? Sandy Koufax. He wouldn't pitch on Yom Kippur. They think that's the Day of the Atonement, High Holy Day. He wouldn't pitch. It fell on a Sunday, so sorry. So it was a World Series. Doesn't matter. He wouldn't do it. So anyway, they're sitting there and they got Liddell, this athlete, world-class athlete. He was going to get the gold for the UK. He was from Scotland. But so they're trying to argue him. Imagine being a young man and you got the king and the chancellor and this other guy, and they're arguing with you. I guess the head of the Olympic Committee going, "What are you, crazy? What's wrong with you?" That's a lot of pressure for a young man. He had to get his ducks in a row, spiritually, philosophically. He had to. So, and so at one point, the prime minister is very upset. And he says, "In my day, it was God first and then country." And the king looks over at him with a cigarette and his legs are crossed, and he just coolly says, "Yes, and the war to end all wars just proved that point bitterly." World War I had just ended. That movie opens with a bunch of disfigured veterans sitting in the train station and so on from World War I. So that was a great line. Anyway, so I'd like to talk today about 3 comments I got. But let's not mistake that this isn't a war. This is not a war. This is not an existential battle. Both sides are saying it. One side is saying it legitimately. The Republican, Trump, conservative. He's even having to pull the Republicans over to him because they don't know which end is up. It has to be Lincoln. He has to be Jefferson. It falls to him because of their lazy, effete wussiness. They're sissies. They're not men. But anyway, the other side, the robot, the meat puppet, corpse, cadaver, puppet for George Soros and Obama, he's saying it's an existential threat, it's a constitutional crisis. Both sides are saying it. So there's no pressure on you. Just realize that it is. They're both right. Except that with our reverse barometer, one side is saying it's a constitutional crisis, it's a threat to democracy. Right. You are the threat to democracy. Democracy. That's what makes it easy to understand what's going on now. If they say hate, they're the ones who hate. If they say racist, they're the ones that are racists. If they say democracy, they're the ones who are tyrants and don't want democracy and don't want a republic. So, it's not like, well, we should all get along. We should all, we should get along with them. You shouldn't hate. I hate them. I hate them. In the good book, in the Old Testament, one of the prophets says, he's talking to God. He says, "I hate them that hate thee." I hate them. They're my enemies. I don't not know my enemy. I know my enemy. And they're making it plain every single day. Every single day. They've stolen everything. and they're trying to destroy everything. It isn't like, well, this philosopher. I used to go to these things called Mars Hill events. And that's named after when Paul the Apostle went and spoke to a place called Mars Hill, where all the philosophers sit around and thought about stuff. And it says that's all they did was sit around and talk about new ideas. So anyway, they called this Mars Hill, and he said, let's take abortion. They'll say, you don't like abortion, don't have one. You don't like pornography, don't watch it. Even though it comes right to your phone, your TV, your children, your library. And their answer is, well, you don't like it, don't turn it off. But you can't say that about their values. You can't turn it off. They say that's oppression. That's constraint. That's discrimination. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But I'm not, it isn't a question of whether I can be nice about this. It's not a question. It's more like Lincoln, like Lincoln's talked about this guy who holds up a stagecoach and he says, give me all your money. Lincoln made this analogy. Give me all your money or I'll shoot you and then you'll be guilty of murder. That's what they do. They're running a scam. They're calling discrimination and family values and hate. Remember that bumper sticker, hate is not a family. You don't tell me what hate is. You don't even believe in the definition of love, let alone hate. And I saw an editorial from Playboy. And never mind how I saw it, but what was the mission statement of Playboy? When Hugh Hefner's daughter took over, she said, they wanted to mainstream pornography, get it instead of a seedy liquor store in a bad part of town. They wanted to get it to the coffee table. That was their objective. So they had this editorial in there, and it said, oh, these self-appointed guardians of the public morals. And I remember I was pretty young. I was, high school or something. And I thought, they're self-appointed. These guys are bitching about self-appointed guardians of the public morals. But it doesn't matter if they're the self-appointed destroyers of public morals. They'd run around saying, you can't legislate morality. I don't know about that. I mean, I think we should have crimes against murder and stealing and treason. I think our founding fathers wanted us to have that. That's legislating morality. Deadbeat dads is legislating morality. Schools, what they can teach and what they can't teach is, there's this fantastic man, Robert Woodson. He created this Woodson Center, and he said that what we need to do, he works with the urban, ghetto, etc. It's a black man. He's so brilliant. If you can find out anything about him, just check him out. Anyway, he says we need to remoralize because we've been demoralized. DEM, first three letters, Democrat Party. Demoralize. I'm not telling you this because I'm out to get Democrats. I'm telling you this because good people, how does evil triumph? Good people do nothing. Good men do nothing. That's how evil triumphs. Good man, just by being good, can keep a great many others from going astray. This is real simple stuff. I'm not saying, I'm saying it because there are people in the squishy middle that say, oh, I don't think you can say that you can't be a believer in God and the Constitution and be a Democrat. You can't say that. Some of my best friends are Democrat, whatever. What are they doing? What are the Democrats doing? They're enjoying your useful idiot status. But what are they doing? Look what they're doing. How many examples do we need? There was a thing the other night about Ilhan Omar, and I've been hearing it for probably 2 years, that she married her brother to defraud the immigration system. They put her in Congress. Is that true or not true? She should be suing for slander. So just the other day, they're talking about her net worth went from 30 million, her tax status, to like 100,000 or 18,000 in one report. What? It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. That's called nihilism. That's the new zeitgeist or spirit of the age. Nihilism. Nihil, nothing. Nihilo, nothing. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. My older brother fell from grace, and oldest brother, and he loved Bill Maher because Bill Maher was ranting nihilism at the time, and I said, you're a nihilist. He said, well, I don't know if I'm a nihilist or not, as if it doesn't matter. But you can't like destroy everything and then expect me to say, oh well, that's cool, that's fine. That's fine. No, I tremble for our country. Thomas Jefferson said, I tremble for our country. This is horrible.
Well, he had slaves.
Yeah. So do you. So does your party. They never quit having them. They've just made more, different kinds. Anyway, we have to remoralize. We have to stop these lies of using words for lies. Make love, not war. That's what they said when Vietnam was going on. Make love, not war. Was that love? Was that love that they were doing? Free love. Free love. Well, we found out that it was sex, not love. Oh, that's one of the things you're not supposed to talk about. That's one of the things you're not supposed to talk about. Sex. Oh, okay, we'll just call it love. Bing. Do you think the children of those hookups and the victims of those hookups thought it was love? But why do people couch terms in different terms? Why do they call an adultery an affair? Adultery, if you think about it, is treason. You're breaking a covenant. You're cheating. They call it an affair. They're sleeping together. No, they're not sleeping together. They're fornicating. Well, you're pretty legalistic and meh. Do you think it was love though? Do they have a right to just take a word and change it and take it away? Forget gay. Forget rainbow. They can take whatever words they want. Now, where did that morph into? Now they're taking the words hate and saying we're the ones who define what it is. They say you're divisive. And then you drive through the neighborhood and they got a different flag. They even took the American flag and put rainbow colors, rainbow stripes and things. And they have a symbol. So I put out a flag. Am I supposed to go find a flag? They have them. They're trying to be funny. Of heterosexual, missionary position couple, like those mud flaps you see on the back of a truck of a woman silhouette, very suggestive. Are we supposed to have, am I supposed to put up one that says straight and get a red, white, and blue flag? That means, why am I supposed to be dividing myself up? That means your neighborhood flies a different flag. You fly a different flag because you're trying to unite us? The United States of America? Or are you trying to divide us? And then you call me divisive. And then you call me hate. First we tolerate. No. First we abhor. Then we tolerate. Then we embrace. And then the step 4 we have to add. Stage 4 cancer. We have to say we're compelled, forced to embrace. If that's not tyranny, there's no such thing. What they've done to every single thing in our secular 10 Commandments, religion, speech, assembly, peaceful assembly, arms, wrongful arrest, states' rights, federal rights superseding states' rights when necessary, like in the Civil War. So anyway, I want to talk about 3 sort of comments that we got here. One of them came from they came from 3 different kind of demographics. One was a veteran, Navy veteran. He's a retired professional, a construction manager. Good, just salt of the earth, great guy. One of them came from an unwitting, awful. Unwitting means you don't know. You don't know. It's like in Sixth Sense. I see dumb people. They don't know that they're stupid. They don't know that they're ignorant. I'm sorry, not stupid. Not stupid, Phi Beta Kappa in some cases, but ignorant because they ignore something right in front of their nose because they have to for tribe's sake. So she's a useful idiot and awful. We'll define these terms. Awful. AWFUL. Affluent white female urbane leftist. Or uninformed if you prefer to urbane. It just so happens that they always coincide. Big cities. Big cities are dark blue, and so are the universities that basically equate to big cities in the flyover country. That's how that cancer spreads. So her, like Kat Timpf on Gutfeld, that's one of them. And the other one is a young man who's just got a new wife and a new life, new career. He's got all the stress points, probably trying to have a baby. And he's on our side, those of the righteous, the right, the conservative right. He's on our side, but he doesn't want anything but peace. So, and the other one is another fine young man who said he would like me to talk more about what used to be the law and what changed and how it changed. So, I first of all, I congratulate all of you because you all show that we're lost. You all show that we're lost, you know? So, first one, well, let's take them in no particular order, but this veteran, he sent me a meme that talked about, let me see what it was, some sort of an act. It was the McWarren-Walter Act of 1952. And it says, the meme says that, shows George H.W. Bush and says, oh, we're screwed now because this law used to ban Muslims from holding office. Well, it's not true. So, he kind of asked, what's your opinion about this? So here it is. You look it up, you get AI, which references AP and other places. Oh God, AP. Oh man. Got to think of an acronym for that piece of crap. Might as well be the old Pravda and Izvestia from the Soviet Union. Anyway, it says the claim that the McWarren-Walter Act of 1952, officially the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, bans Muslims from holding public office is false. While this legislation was highly controversial and discriminatory, those are not bad words. Those are necessary words for life, controversial and discriminatory. You have to discriminate. Its restrictions focused on national origins, race, and political ideology. Wow, why would any country discriminate against political ideology if they were trying to keep their country? Why would they do that? Specifically, communist subversion, not religious faith. It was passed in 1952, and what else? Well, what were they doing in 1952 with this thing? What were they doing? And it's always important to look at what they were doing. I was a basketball referee, and we were taught, think about the intent of the rule. This is the way SCOTUS should be thinking. What's the intent of our founders? To preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. That's it. They tried to set up the best thing they could. They did an unbelievable job. They're better than Shohei Ohtani or the greatest athletes, the greatest scientists rolled in. They did an awesome job of trying, but to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. That's what they did. That's what they were trying to do. So, So what is the story with this McCarran Act or whatever? What is the story? What's the point? What was happening in 1952? What was happening? That's about the time they put under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. What was happening? Well, we were fighting the communists in Korea after we just saved them from the Japanese in World War and from the Germans in World War II. That's the thanks we got. They tried to take over the world. Mao, Stalin, the two worst people. This Khomeini and his predecessor Khomeini, whatever. They were devils in the extreme, but nothing like Stalin and Mao. My God. So what were they doing? They were trying to keep communists out. So they restricted the amount of places. They restricted the places where immigrants could come from. Hello? So I had to answer this guy. I answered him privately, but I'll do it here. Is that no? It didn't have anything to do with Muslims. But again, if we go back to the founding fathers, the founding fathers created this country, and they didn't factor in. They didn't really reckon on Muslims holding office, because what was going on? They were fighting Muslims. They were fighting Muslims that were in the, I don't know, what should we say, acting like pirates in the area near Somalia. They were taking our ships, and they were doing it to all of NATO, pre-NATO, Europe. They were taking our ships, taking our stuff, selling the ships or holding it for ransom or a protection racket. They were taking our people and putting them into slavery. And at one point, some of the founding fathers met with the head of the area in Libya or Algiers or wherever it was, this Muslim Mufta, whatever the heck he was, the High Panjandrum. He was an ambassador from that area. And they said, why are you taking our people? Why do you think you can take our people? He says, well, the Quran says we can. Well, Thomas Jefferson had a Quran. Yeah, yes, he did. He wanted to read about it. He wanted to know what was going on. That doesn't mean, one of the guys, Ellison, this Muslim Islamo-Nazi from Minnesota, what a shock. He was sworn in on the Quran that Thomas Jefferson, he checked it out like the Library of Congress and wanted to be sworn in. So the point is, they wouldn't have thought about, well, wait a minute, because they just put into the Constitution Article 6 that said that they can't discriminate against they can't make them take a religious test to run for office. And so, yeah, the oath of office, Clause 3 in Article 6. It requires senators, representatives, state legislators, and all executive judicial officers, both state and federal, to take an oath or affirmation to support the U.S. Why affirmation? What if they didn't believe in God? That's what you do. You don't say, I swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. You say, I affirm. This is the genius of lawyers and judicial people that come up with it. Well, just have them say they affirm. But they were being cool with it back then. They said, what if? We'll talk about it on a whole nother show. But Jefferson was very responsible for setting up a lot of tolerance. It doesn't mean he was a Muslim. He was an atheist. He was a deist, blah, 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 blah. Like they'll teach you at a very expensive college or university. Anyway, requires senators, representatives, state legislators, and all executive judicial officers, both state and federal, to take an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. No religious test, Clause 3, specifically states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any public office or trust under the United States. I went to Colonial Williamsburg, and they had a debate on the separation of church and state. And it was between Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry. I mean, these men that portray them, these reenactors, they're unbelievable. The one that was Jefferson, we saw him several times with our family there at his press conferences and things, at his speeches. You could go around. He's the guy that plays Jefferson when you go to the basement of the Jefferson Memorial. I mean, he's been doing it for, if he's still alive, he's doing it a long time. Anyway, and they had this debate on separation of church and state, Patrick Henry and him. And they brought up, because the crowd yelled, what about Muslims? And Patrick Henry walks over to him and says, It was very, very cute. He says, "What is a Muslim?" And Jefferson laughs and says, that's a follower of Mohammedans. And Patrick Henry says, oh, pagans. Okay. You know, uh, but the problem they were having was that there was this, there were, uh, they had this practice that kind of came from Europe, is that taxes would go to building churches. A portion of your taxes would go to building churches. And if you didn't want that, not one particular church, that's what the First Amendment's all about, but a church. They thought it was a good thing if a portion of your taxes went to building churches, because they build the country up instead of tear it down, in theory and in practice back then. But they said, if you don't want it to go, you can earmark it to go to a public school to be built. So at one point in this debate, somebody yelled out, "What about Catholics?" And Patrick Henry said, "Well, you know what? They can either mark their taxes to go for a public school, because we're not going to build Catholic churches, or we can they can go to Maryland, where they can worship as they please." Because Maryland was set up as a haven for Catholics to tolerate them, but they never thought they would take over. They never thought they would hold high office. That's why 1960, 300 years after the Mayflower, that era, it took that long for any Catholic to be holding high office. JFK. Because why? They were afraid they would have more loyalty to the Pope than to their country. That was the fear that people had. And so, is that legitimate? I don't know. Look what the Pope's telling us now. The Pope is telling us being U.S., United States, what we ought to do about foreign policy. Huh? What? I don't want to repeat it again, but you understand. What? What? The Pope's telling us what we're supposed to do about foreign policy. Meloni, the president of Italy, or prime minister, or whatever they're called, the Pope was telling her to take all these migrants. Take all these migrants. I mean, it's a pretty short shot, just like Spain, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, whatever. It's a pretty short shot to come from Northern Africa or the Middle East and get there. And the Pope's saying, take them all. And she said, oh, okay, cool. I'll put them in the Vatican. And strangely silent. Put your vast wealth where your mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is, or shut up. But don't tell us. The Vatican is a separate country. And I know Marco Rubio is a Catholic, I guess, and maybe J.D. Vance is Catholic. That's why I'm losing patience with him. He was on talking very calmly and sweetly about, well, I think it's cool when the Pope says something that we ought to do. It's okay. It's all right. No, it is not. So Meloni called BS on him. She said, I love her. She said, okay, we'll put them all in the Vatican. It's a separate country. That's why Noriega in Panama could go hide in the Vatican embassy when he was hiding from the authorities when they were trying to get him as a drug runner. Another story for another day. But so when they had this thing about oaths of office, requires senators, representatives, and all executives, both state and federal, to take an oath of affirmation, and no religious test, specifically states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public office. So, I had to point out to this guy that they weren't worried about Muslims getting high office, either New York, like Mamdani, or the White House, like Obama, and others that are competing for it right now. They weren't worried about it because they knew we're not going to put people that we're at war with, an ideology that we're at war with. We're not going to put them in here. Not going to take over. They weren't worried about Mormons either, because the Mormonism hadn't been invented yet. It was another 30 years or so before it was invented. So that's why, Romney wouldn't have had to take a test. But they didn't think that such things would happen. So that's kind of the religious side. Catholics have been kind of sort of discriminated against. Let's take Harvard, for example. Let's just take Harvard, the granddaddy of them all. They had, and here's a little thing to look for when AI tells you things. You look up, I had this idea in my head that Harvard allowed blacks and Jews in before they allowed Catholics. And so I had that in my head, and I wanted to see it was true. So I look it up, and here's a little report from AI. While Harvard University did not have a formal policy banning Catholics that lasted longer than those against Jews or African Americans, it has a documented history of prejudice, quotas, and exclusionary practices against Catholics, Jews, and other groups, particularly in the late 19th and 20th centuries. Exclusion of Catholics, Jesuits in particular. In 1893, Harvard President Charles W. Eliot helped implement a policy that effectively barred graduates of Jesuit colleges from regular admission to Harvard Law School. Exclusion of Catholics. Just read that. Discrimination against Jews. In the 1920s, almost 30 years later, President A. Lawrence Lowell attempted to impose a 12% quota on Jewish students. And while the faculty rejected it, the numbers were intentionally cut in half anyway through, in part, the introduction of, quote, character and, quote, fitness criteria. Oh, God forbid that the place that graduated Teddy Roosevelt, who said, to educate a man without morals is to create a menace to society. God forbid that Harvard would think about things like character and fitness. I'm not talking about whether they apply it to a religion or a color of a skin. I'm talking about the idea of them being allowed to have a bar to clear on with regard to character and fitness criteria. Timing of the quotas. By the early 1920s, quotas were operative against Jews, Catholics, and other new groups. Keep that thought. These discriminatory practices, including the, quote, secret court, unquote, of 1920, which targeted gay students, were largely dismantled after World War II, when admissions began to be standardized for a more diverse group of students. In summary, discrimination against Catholics was prevalent in the late 19th, 20th century, particularly against those from Jesuit institutions. Exclusion of black students. Black students were largely kept out of Harvard until the mid-19th century. Those who were not taught, that's the 1800s. So around the time of the Civil War, they were allowed at Harvard. The first black undergraduate was admitted in 1847, 13 years before the Civil War, though he died before matriculating. So let's recap. Harvard, which was founded by Puritans, whose motto is truth, and who today has segregated dorms for blacks, segregated graduation ceremonies for blacks. Not in 1870, today. And they have lower standards for blacks to the exclusion of Asians who aren't mentioned in this. So let's recap. Harvard allowed blacks, men, only men. They only allowed women in the 1975, right after Nixon. That's when women were allowed to Harvard. It's kind of like voting. Women were allowed to vote after the amendment in 1920, but black men were allowed to vote way before that. So black men were allowed in first. and then Jews and Catholics. So, with the left, there's always this idea of, it's an inanimate object. It's a gun. It's a condom. It's a color of the skin, pigmentation. It's always an inanimate object. And they said that, these guys, why was it wrong for them? Because they were doing it on a basis of discrimination. Why was that wrong? Because it was on a basis of discrimination. Okay? Against gender, skin color. Wait a minute. What are you saying today about gender? You don't even know what a woman is. Are we going to go back? Is there any retroactive credits or anything to all the people that you screwed out of it? But now you don't even know what they are? So, you got to have a decent compass. But they call it discrimination, and they say it's all on an inanimate object. No, the people coming from Eastern Europe, where they put the restrictions, they were bringing communism, anarchy. They were going around in the 1920s blowing up buildings, like Obama's friend, Professor Bill Ayer, did with the Weather Underground. They were blowing up places. They were fighting for communism. They were trying to bring what destroyed their place they were escaping and bring it here. That's why it was against. It wasn't because they were Jews. It wasn't because that, the color of their skin. Don't reduce something to an inanimate object and go, aha. That's really, really ignorant. Anyway, I got to get out of here. That's the end of part 1 here of the freeform answering of questions, and we will take it up next time. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Jeremiah Gunn Show saying, I love you.